This is the perfect place for Sam to lay right behind me, pressing on my back. Perfect. Hey guys, it's Vanessa. Today I wanted to talk about the books that have been longlisted for the National Book Award for Nonfiction. I want to read a majority of the ones that have been longlisted, and I think that they all sound really fascinating. The majority of them I have heard talked about, but some of them were kind of not surprises, but just books that I hadn't heard about. So I don't know if I'm going to participate in this, like read the whole long list before winners are announced November 15th, but I wanted to talk about them to see if any of them sound interesting to you guys, and also to let you know which ones are like possibilities that I really want to get to. The first book is Never Caught. It is a focus on the life of Ona Judge, who was a runaway slave of Washington's. From the synopsis, it sounded so intriguing to me to learn about how Washington would allow for 6-month stints, and then right before 6 months were about to pass, he would basically demand for the slaves to come back. 6 months in the North meant you were like completely free now. The fact that there's research into how Washington circumvented to make sure that his slaves were still under him, that I never heard about that. I've read some of the reviews on Goodreads, and some of them make it seem like there's a lot of repetition in this book, which is not that great, and that they don't focus as much on Ona Judge, and they focus more on like the back and forth of Martha Washington and George Washington going around the country, and that they wish it had been more focused on the runaway slave, Ona Judge. But this one does sound like something that is fascinating and interesting to me, and a piece of history that I'd never heard about before this. So this is one of the ones that's like at the top of the list. Sam, you can't bite that. Here, you have toys. The next book is Oh no, this isn't gonna work. I've made a huge mistake. Number 2 is The Evangelicals, and this is a book that is about the evangelical movement in the United States from Puritans to the 2016 election. So that covers a long time span, and that is why the book is 752 pages long. This is one that I probably will not get to. Though this movement is interesting to me for the repercussions that it's had in our politics and in conservative politics, I don't know if I can read 700 pages about the evangelical movement. So this one is not really gonna happen, I don't think. The next one is Locking Up Our Own, and this one focuses on how there is a rise of black mayors and politicians and police chiefs, but that these prominent black officials that have been elected still embrace the tough on crime, and that has had a devastating effect on the black neighborhoods that they seek to represent. This definitely is supposed to focus on how punitive our criminal justice system is. It clocks at 320 pages, which is a lot more doable, and is one that I am extremely interested in reading. The next book is The Future is History, which is a book that focuses on totalitarianism and its rise in Russia by following 4 specific people who were born in the age of democracy, but whose dreams are kind of impossible in this new mafia state that is Russia at the moment. And this one is a possibility for me to read. The next book is Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think this is like the sole true crime book in this long list, looking into dozens of members of the Osage Indian Nation in Oklahoma who were the richest people per capita in the whole world in the 1920s. Basically follows the murder of a bunch of them that is then taken up by the FBI. They had like undercover officers as well who did an inadequate job, and this book looks at how prejudice towards Native Americans led the murderers to continue with impunity for such a long time. This book is 320 pages, which also seems like one that I will get to. The next book is No Is Not Enough, and this looks into how we have arrived at this particular political moment, definitely looking into Donald Trump, and her argument, Naomi Klein's, is that Donald Trump is not an aberration, but actually a product of our time, and she seeks to use this as a toolkit that we could use to resist the shock tactics that he uses. This one is at 240 pages, so it's really short. I don't know if I'll really get to this one. Naomi Klein, I think, is an author that I would like to try out, but I don't know if this one is going to be the first one that I try, but we'll see. I've been reading a lot of politically themed stuff, and this might pair well with Timothy D. Snyder's 20 Lessons and Brooke Gladstone's little pamphlet that I read recently as well. The next book is Democracy in Chains, and this book is described as an expose of the right's relentless campaign to rid us of unions, suppress voting, privatize public education, and change the Constitution. This book, I feel like, has gotten the most flack out of all of these, and tries to trace all of this to James McKill Buchanan. and seeing how that has led to the Koch brothers and where we are now. I think that the main reactions to this book that have been negative is saying it's trying to basically do what a lot of the left is arguing the right is doing, and that is like being susceptible to conspiracy theories. I've read pieces on both the Washington Post and on Vox, which are mostly left-leaning news sites, especially Vox, saying that this book is not necessarily great. So I don't think this one is one that I'm going to get to, but I'm definitely all ears to hear more reviews about this. The next book is The Color of Law, and this one is probably the one I am most excited about from this entire list. It focuses on how it was definitely primarily de jure segregation and not de facto segregation that promoted discrimination in our society. We have this idea that it wasn't necessarily the actual laws on the books, but the way that people were not complying with the law that discriminated. But that's not the case in this argument, and I think it's very true. There were zoning laws, urban planning that was made in the 1950s that led to our segregated neighborhoods of today. And while we have a Fair Housing Act, it is only going to prevent future discrimination. It's not going to fix the discrimination that has led to the segregation in housing that we have had since the 50s. So this is going to look into all of that, and it is at 360 pages, which I think is doable. And this one's probably the one that I would try first out of this entire list. The next book on the list was The Blood of Emmett, which is the only book from this entire list that I've already read, and I've reviewed it as well. It follows the case of Emmett and his brutal murder, how the media reported it, how his mother and his family went through that whole situation, and also interviewing the person who accused him of whistling at her, who has taken that back after the fact 50 years later and said that it didn't happen. And I thought that it was a well done book by a historian that is well known. I've mentioned all my qualms about it. I wasn't able to rate this book 5 stars, but it was pretty close to that. And last but not least, the last book on this list is Bunk, and this traces the history of the hoax, which I think is so great for our times, and I never heard about this book until the long list. This is going through P.T. Barnum all the way up to now with our lovely president, Donald Trump. He asks what it means to live in a post-factual world using Stephen Colbert's truthiness, showing how that is really damaging reality, fact, and art today. And this one is kind of long, which I would not expect, but it's 480 pages, so I don't know if I'll get to this one. So definitely from this entire list, the ones that must happen is The Color of Law, Killers in the Flower Moon, Locking Up Our Own, and Never Caught, and then after that, The Future is History. I don't think The Evangelicals is going to happen for me. I don't think Bunk is going to happen for me, and I don't think Democracy in Chains is going to happen for me. And we'll see about Naomi Klein's No Is Not Enough. That is the list. I've never been like super into awards things, so we'll see which of these I end up getting to either in the next 2 months or in the next year. If any of the long list books are some that you might be interested in or that you've already read, let me know in the comments and we can chat about it. Thanks so much for watching my video and enduring that monster. I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye. Get a toy that doesn't do that. Whose dreams are kind of impossible. Oh my god. Sam! Why? Sir. Alright, let's try to get through this video. Oh, wet nose! Sam. And this book looks at how prejudice towards Native— oh my— do you see this? Using Stephen Colbert's— Sam, I'm trying to record!